Here's your WESN News on the Hour. I'm Numi Magnesh. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. O'Meara Road renamed in honor of Lisa Morris Julian. UNC completes screening for general election candidates. New Grant man charged with 4 counts of murder. And internationally, Hollywood icon Gene Hackman and wife found dead in Santa Fe home. Now for the details. The Ministry of Works and Transport officially renamed O'Meara Road to Lisa Morris Julian Boulevard in a touching ceremony on February 26. The event was attended by Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, government officials, and the Morris Julian family. Minister Rohan Sinanan reflected on Morris Julian's contributions and the impact of the upgraded roadway, which now includes improved traffic features such as jug handle, roundabout, and expanded lanes. Dr. Rowley described the renaming as a lasting tribute to the late Davide O'Meara MP, who tragically passed away in a house fire with 2 of her children last December. As a plaque was unveiled in her memory, emotions ran high with her daughter overcome with grief. The United National Congress has completed its candidate screening process for the upcoming general elections, with over 200 party members participating. In a statement, the party expressed gratitude to its supporters, emphasizing unity and commitment to change. So far, 8 candidates have been announced, with more to be revealed in the coming weeks. The UNC reaffirmed its mission to save Trinidad and Tobago from what it described as a decade of mismanagement under the current administration. The party assured that all members, regardless of selection, would have a role in its campaign. A New Grant man has been charged with the 2020 murders of 4 men, including 3 foreign nationals. Clint Charles, 43, appeared virtually before Master Comitria Gray in the South Criminal Court on February 25th. He was not called upon to plead and was remanded in custody until his next court appearance on April 29th, alongside his co-accused. The charges follow the discovery of the victims' bodies in a bushy area off Daly Road, Tableland on May 25, 2020. Charles was arrested after a years-long investigation that led to his capture in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. He was formally charged by ASP Passad of the Homicide Bureau after legal advice from Deputy DPP Sabrina Dugdeen Jaglal. The investigation was led by ASP Passad and supervised by Senior Superintendent Dil Paul and Superintendent Passad. Internationally, Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman, 95, and his wife Betsy Arakawa, 63, were found dead in their Santa Fe home on Wednesday afternoon. Authorities say no foul play is suspected at this time, but the cause of death remains undetermined as investigations continue. Santa Fe County deputies responded to the couple's old Sunset Trail residence around 1:45 p.m., where they also discovered their deceased dog. Hackman, a 2-time Academy Award winner, was celebrated for his roles in The French Connection and Unforgiven. He had a decades-long career portraying heroes, villains, and anti-heroes before retiring in the early 2000s. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi Magnish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
Swoop said, I cannot give you the formula for success, but I can give you the formula for failure, which is try to please everybody. And I do wonder if our soon-to-be expected interim, maybe beyond that, Prime Minister Stuart Young, is potentially making one of 2 mistakes. Either he is giving out all the promises, knowing that he's not going to fulfill them, or he's actually making all the promises, not realizing that it will possibly be impossible to truly live up to them. Minister Young recently said, as PM, culture would be a priority. And he's already also made a claim that he'll be looking, I believe, into the syllabus of our education system, or looking at the education system in some capacity. Education, culture. Well, we just need for him to say sport and diversification, and he'll more or less hit all the usual suspects, right? The issue with that is, 9 years later, things like education, culture, and sports and diversification have been treated as red-headed stepchildren. Or there's a new airport coming to Tobago, but with regards to the industry and what it means to the industry, a new airport is like, well, it's like giving a Mercedes-Benz van to someone that sells water on the highway. Pretty sure he doesn't need a whole Mercedes-Benz to transport his tons and tons of water. Van. One of those sprinters or what have you. Or even better, like a big rig. Now, granted, if he had a water operation that grew, and he was a major distributor, producer, a wholesaler, maybe even retailer, then yes, something like a big rig might make sense. But when he just has a little cooler on the highway. So, I don't know where Stuart Young is coming with this statement. And, you know, he's in the moment, so that's part of it. He was at, I believe, the stick fighting finals, right, last night. He's in the moment, the crowd is there, he's feeling the energy. It's easy to be positive and enthusiastic when you're in the middle of it. But then now, when it comes time to go in the cabinet budget meetings, when it comes time to speak to your Minister of Finance to say how much money we have, what we have to spend it on. What are the most important responsibilities? And we have many. Will culture get its fair share? Agriculture, I think agriculture didn't even get a stated figure for allocation in this year's budget. I could be wrong. Usually it's nothing to talk about. Last I remember that. So, part of it is, but the administration didn't prioritize these things. I've said this before I believe when he spoke about education. You're making campaign promises while you're technically going to be in power. Now, granted, the few months he has as Prime Minister, we know it should be less than a year, right? It has to be. How much can he do? But at the same time, unless you're trying to say that your administration is going to shift gears and have a very different policy to your predecessor's administration, I'm kind of left wondering, what exactly am I supposed to make of these statements? To what extent am I supposed to really believe them? That's one of the things that disadvantaged Kamala Harris, because she was part of the incumbent, but she made the worst mistake of saying she wouldn't change anything, indicating that a vote for her was a vote for more of the same, which potentially was one of the major contributing factors to sink her for voters who were disgruntled with aspects of the status quo. And let's be real, there are probably a lot of people who are upset about various aspects of the status quo in TNT. Now, Minister Young is saying, as Prime Minister, this is the second time he said something like this he's saying, not necessarily directly, but he's essentially giving us a promise that indicates things will be different. Not just different with regards to, oh, we'll spend a little bit more money here instead of there, but potentially, to some extent, a philosophical change in government priorities. The problem is, I've never seen a government really effectively do that. They all kind of default to the same thing. Well, how they allocate their resources, what they prioritize, energy sector, and whatever government program, and if you need to spend more on police, which we haven't even really seen that, right? Although, look, even the Prime Minister complained about police spending on vehicles, and then, for whatever reason, when push came to shove, they ended up buying the new SUVs that the Prime Minister, I believe, was complaining about anyway. Why do they need new SUVs? Blah, 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 blah. And then, bam, they ended up having to, I don't know if it's the amount the police wanted or what have you, but I do know that he was criticizing police purchases of new vehicles in one press conference, and that was the end of that. We didn't really hear anything about that anymore. It was almost like if, right, you tried, and then reality, for whatever reason, slapped him in the face, and he had to come right back down to earth and do what's always done. Part of my concern is, for whatever reason, people want to say politicians are smart. So what that means to me is that there is something serious in the public sector that causes them to default, to go back to the default rather, to go back to the business as usual. Not just because of things like laziness and incompetence, but rather there's something there, a lack of political will, a lack of social or societal will perhaps could be a factor. Because even if it's not a direct problem, the public service kind of being a mess, and the obstruction of those who won't do today what they could do tomorrow and won't do on Friday what they could do Monday. Ironically, the government can legitimately probably complain about it, and yet they do nothing about it. And perhaps that might be the real thing that I want to hear from Stuart Young. Because a lot of these other things are nice, pie in the sky, idealistic things that I do want to see happen. But I will say this probably to the point where you will be fed up of me saying it. I believe the first thing you have to do is to clean up the public sector. Campaign financing is also right up there at the top of the list. I don't necessarily have faith in the politicians actually doing that, because you could figure that part out yourself. But if you want to improve the country, you have to clean up the public system. And that is probably going to be one task that will take up an entire administration, and there will be people who, assuming you're doing it in good faith, there will be people who will be kicking and screaming trying to prevent it, including members of the public who want the government to improve, but they don't want the status quo to change. Hence, how do you expect it to improve? Because magically, we will just do the same things, but somehow just do it better. Meanwhile, one of the interesting things, of course, is Young being the interim prime minister. It will technically fall on him to announce the next general election. And some political analysts think we could be heading to the polls in August. During a time period when people travel, is that a good idea? Or maybe it's strategic. We don't want a certain cross-section of the population to be available to vote. It'll be a hell of a thing if that's the case. We have to see how this plays out. Again, we wait for March 16th to see how that part of the transition, the first part, goes. Will the election come before the new budget? Will it come after the mid-year review? What will be the best time to spend the results or the data? You know, to some extent, it's hard to say up front, and to some extent, it's hard to say to what degree the public will believe all of it. I don't necessarily hope for the worst. I don't want spicy material for me to talk every morning, juicy things, bacchanal and all kind of nonsense. I would much rather our country be extremely boring. And you know what? If I had a choice, I would wish that the country was moving along in such a boring, stable manner that I'd be out of a job. That would be my choice. Unfortunately, that is not human nature. All right. Let's take the break now. When we come back, we'll go into the daily review. Stay tuned. This is Talk About a WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the corresponding banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man
is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Nah, you don't need to register nothing. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
They believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploiting the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
And we're back here on Talk About a WESN, and as promised to close out the week, important topics, including one coming out of yesterday, the big story. Before I mention it, it's time to go to today's daily review. And what apparently was a late press conference because the conversations were so spicy that it caused them to go over time in the cabinet meeting yesterday. It's kind of funny. What would you call Minister Young right now? Because he's not Prime Minister elect. he's not I guess he's the presumptive nominee. And perhaps this is an opportunity. And again, I actually will not fault the Prime Minister for saying, hey, you're up. I am retiring. This is my pre-retirement process. You go out there and talk to them people because I have done this enough. Cool. We get a chance to see Prime Minister, well, the presumed interim Prime Minister Young take the reins, I guess. And although this is an issue, to be fair, which he probably would have been point on anyway, being Minister of Energy, the actual Minister of Energy currently, and that is, of course, with regards to the refinery. Now, we did also touch on the situation with the U.S. on Dragon, but we'll get to that later on in the show before our guests. Now, the key point is, first of all, he went through, like what the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister has done in the past, the whole, this is the backstory. And I understand, to some extent, always giving context. I just wish that we don't just have good speakers as politicians, but good communicators, because he could have gotten to the bullet points in a much more efficient and elegant manner, and then gotten to the meat of the matter a lot quicker. I don't know if they're stat padding. I don't know if this is how they used to write their papers when they were in university, but I don't necessarily need you to utilize most of the body and the structure of the last paper, aka the last time you spoke about the refinery, or usually when you speak about the refinery, you bring up these points anyway, right? First of all, if you want to say the refinery is losing money, I personally have yet to see the government really provide us with hard details on that, because they have my callers who dispute it. And then there is also the question of, depending on the nature of the losses, because yes, you could calculate it into US dollars. Was it actually losing US dollars? Again, hard details, hard evidence, hard proof, hard details, repeated the point for emphasis, would help, because if the losses weren't actually being incurred in US currency, regardless of how you write it in your account book, one could argue we could lose TT dollars in order to have more US dollars. That could have been a way, ironically, to kind of essentially shunt, how do I explain this? To experience a rise in the exchange rate without actually experiencing it in the exchange rate. If you actually could follow what I just said, kudos to you. You could call in and get your props later. Now, one of the things that he also brought up in defense of this situation was the whole Jindal situation, where, again, population has a right to voice a concern. It was a low-hanging fruit, and I don't know if it was on social media, but at least from what I saw in the public, the opposition actually did not say anything that I could disagree with regards to Jindal. So then Stuart Young said something that, and we'll get to the main point, but he said something very chilling with regards to his mother is one of the most richest people in the world. And I'm like, you know, wealth should not make right. If that is a motivating factor, how much money someone has and what it could do for us or against us, as opposed to what should or should not be. Like, I get it, best interest of the country is not to piss off people with that amount of wealth, but if we can't voice concerns, yes, Jindal, apparently he got another contract with the state, but listen, are you telling me that everything that goes on in India is lacking in corruption, that it's all squeaky clean? Like, we don't know. We just know that he has a case before the court. It's a fair question to say, why are we going into business with somebody like this? And I think to some extent, it's very telling that he ran away, because it was an obvious question. Again, it makes me think, one, he wasn't serious. And if the PNM thinks he was serious, I do wonder if he was kind of playing them a little bit. Two, this could have easily been put to bed, ironically, if the government and Mr. Jindal were confident in the situation and moved to suit. But they didn't, right? Apparently, the little old lady, you know, just said a few mean words, and the weak billionaire decided that he's going to go home. I just find it ridiculous that if other businessmen were that thin-skinned, they won't be able to do business. So there has to be something else. Was he personally insulted? Oh my. Again, it was very obvious things that were brought up, unless we talk about social media, in which case Lord only knows what was said there by both members of whichever party and their supporters. Now, like I said, Stuart Young showed that he was a good speaker, not necessarily a good communicator, because all of those things kind of didn't really matter per se, trying to justify with regards to how some of the sales went. One of the interesting things that I didn't know before he spoke, though, that was appreciated, the local LLC, the group that was trying to come together to buy the refinery, they couldn't raise the capital. That unsolicited proposal fell through. That was one of the more recent developments, and that leads us to this situation here now, where apparently two of the bidders were looking to not necessarily buy but lease the refinery, and Oando PLC, Oando has been identified by Cabinet as the preferred bidder. They have communicated as such to Trinidad Petroleum Heritage Limited, I believe. And one of the other reasons why is because apparently not only will they be leasing the refinery, but they will also be essentially paying for certain services with Paria, et cetera, so they'll be using pre-existing infrastructure, and it would help generate more consistent income over time, right, from various streams, not just the purchase or lease of the refinery, but through other linkages in our local energy sector. Preferred bidder, the deal hasn't been done yet, getting the financing, but then there's also another step with regards to Oando probably still has to really get more detail with regards to what the cost will be like to restart the refinery. And then, you know, add that to their business plan, their business proposal, so forth, and then move forward, actually source the financing. But one of the main reasons why the government prefers Oando is they have shown that they can source financing, which I guess it's been one of the stumbling blocks for patriotic, according to the government. According to the government, not according to me. Don't call in and say I said stupidness, according to the government. One of the stumbling blocks for the other local conglomerate as well as other bidders. So we have to wait and see. And also apparently they will be able to source oil from Nigeria or parts of Africa, which is one of the things that is needed for the refinery to operate, obviously. Not any and every oil will work, as Stuart Young said. I'm having to remind myself not to call him Prime Minister. Yeah, this is crazy. But one of the interesting things with this whole situation, I guess to some extent, is the level of assumption that has been levied on it already. First of all, they are the preferred bidder. Will it go through? Because we have heard things that so-and-so was the preferred bidder, and the government want to give it to this one, and the government want to give it to that one, and the government want to give it to Jindal, and the government want to give it to the local businessman, and the government want to do this and the government want to do that. And none of it has come to pass. So before, I mean, I get it. One time we think that the government prefers somebody and it didn't go through, doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't prefer them. Hold on. Let's not go in full conspiracy mode, because you literally can't have full conspiracy from multiple people that you prefer to, and you're trying to force it into their hands, right? Granted, of course, it doesn't help that the procurement regulator is not a part of this. But the opposition leader, she came out and said, in a voice note that I did hear, and her tone was an interesting one. Her speech was interesting. That's all I'll say about that. It was interesting to hear her pace, her tempo, you know, anyway, her speech was interesting. She has already said that she's going to pursue investigations, guarantee that the UNC will pursue investigations against everyone who participates in this theft of the refinery assets, point-of-sale refinery assets. Already said that they're not going to honor any deal, right? It's the last gasp corrupt deal to fill the pockets of this outgoing government. Disreputable persons to gift the refinery, All right. I mean, again, I could understand you saying that about Jindal, but anyway. They will not honor any agreement that this government enters into regarding the point-of-sale refinery, and we guarantee that the UNC will pursue investigations against everyone who participates in the theft, despite right. Here's the problem with that. We haven't seen the deal yet. And I get it. You don't necessarily want to give the government the benefit of the doubt. It's hard to trust the government that has shown that they are willing to not necessarily believe it or not, they don't really outright lie to you. They just find a way to massage the truth. And I'm not talking about they massage the truth into a lie. I'm talking about they utilize the truth. They just don't tell you the things that they think you would not like if you hear them. To make an absolute statement like this, to some extent, is ridiculous. We don't have a deal yet. And you're saying that the deal is corrupt, we won't honor the deal, and we'll investigate the deal. You know what? It'll be real funny if it came out that this deal was done, and it is possible. This can happen, because to some extent, you do see bursts of transparency. It'll be real funny if this deal was like the best thing since sliced bread. Now, granted, Trinbagonians don't have a long memory. So when politicians are hypocritical, we tend to not always remember the times when they had a contrary position to what their current position is. Because there is a world where this deal goes through. Not only will the deal, depending on the level of transparency, be something obviously Kamala Persad-Bissessar, if she was prime minister, would essentially lose popularity if she tried to renege on. But she probably will look at it and be, again, if it's a good deal, she'll keep it. Despite whatever promises and strong words that she says now, she'll keep that sucker. Again, it all depends on if it's a good deal. If it's a bad deal, you don't. Here's the thing. You're making an absolute statement, so you're locking yourself in a position that you might not be able to follow through with, depending on a deal that doesn't exist yet, right? So you're betting on an outcome that has not happened one way or the other. If you just didn't make absolute statements, you want it to sound strong, I understand that. You don't want to sound indecisive, but you've locked yourself in. You could have not done that, and then if the deal was horrible, you could have always then followed up with the actions that you state that you're going to do here. But you locked yourself in. Now you're locked in, and ironically, the government, I guess, I mean, some people want to say that this is four-dimensional chess. I don't think so. The government could say, oh, well, watch this. Just to mess with you. This also is an example of bad communication and bad leadership. Because when the PNM does say that the UNC basically doesn't want the government to succeed, think about it now. There's some truth to that. There is. And that's probably one of the reasons why I am extraordinarily hesitant to trust the opposition in government. Because ironically, this is not supposed to be how it is. But ironically, I have seen the PNM in government with all of their mistakes, blunders, and unforced errors, questionable decisions, and decisions that appear less than reputable. And I would argue that they have still somehow shown more concern for the country than the opposition. Not that the opposition hasn't shown any concern for the country. It's just everything being undermined, kind of, and not undermined in a constructive way, undermined in a combative way. It kind of just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. It's not a UNC bad taste. It is these kind of decisions that the opposition making are just as questionable. Maybe even more so, because they're more direct, I guess you could say. This election will be very interesting. I have no idea. To some extent, I think anybody who, well, let me not speak for other people. I have no idea how the vote is going to go, because I think we don't have a great outlook right now. Now, moving on very quickly, a couple of things to point out. We might try to do this rapid fire. First of all, earlier in the week, DCP Benjamin came out to refute the claim that the White Collar Crime Investigative Unit was now looking to investigate the Commissioner of Police, the substantial Commissioner of Police earlier with Christopher. I just would say one thing to this. We have a newspaper that has given us reports that have not been disproven by the authorities. Although counterclaims have been made, the statements that have been put forward in the press more often than not have not been disproven. So what do we believe? Also, we are at a time when trust and confidence in the authorities, not just the police service, but including, and to some extent especially, the police service, I don't think is very high. They are potentially low, if not at an all-time low. So again, while I am not necessarily happy and I don't necessarily want to make a statement like this or have a position like this, I am more willing to trust my peers in the media than the authorities if there is conflicting information. Unless it is something that is obvious that the media got wrong, which in this case it is not. And to some extent, the media could have gotten it wrong. But this, again, goes to the point that as an organization, the TTPS is behind the curve on credibility. And you cannot act as though you are credible, that you have supreme credibility, when you are behind the curve. It will only make you look less credible. Because you're trying to keep things close to the vest, not reveal information, because that is not just a government thing. That is the norm in our society. That is a societal problem. I understand that. But at the end of the day, because of that, you don't reveal anything, but you do indirectly reveal potentially poor leadership, poor communication skills. Of course, the lack of transparency, it implies certain things, whether they're assumptions, speculatory or not. All of these things you are behind the curve on. You have to work towards earning back trust. Trust is lost like that. Trust is earned over a long period of time with grueling work and near perfect, if not perfect, commitment to that work. So I'm kind of disappointed because you could make this claim, DCP Benjamin, but you need to give us more than just making the claim. Similar to Stuart Young, you can't just, you need to, if you want to bring up the refinery being unprofitable as a defense, you need to give us more than that. Don't just mention it and move on. Don't just mention that this unit is not investigated and move on. This investigation is suspicious as hell. That's why the DPP kept sending it back. Not once, not twice, but thrice. All right, let's move on fast. New scanners for the port. The Minister of Finance and the Minister of Works and Transport, they had a lot of wonderfully optimistic things to say. Great, it will make us more competitive as a port. We have to work together to make the Port of Port of Spain up to the standard that we want. This is a landmark event in modernizing cargo inspection. It confirms the government's commitment to strengthening national security. All of this is fluff. It doesn't confirm nothing. Not one thing. Because actions speak louder than words, and this action is late. It's not just late. It's like the end of school, what you walking in for. We already had all the classes. We packing up to go home. You now come in, what you want to get homework assignments, you're gonna call that in. This is late. This confirms nada. At some point, when you're trying to sell us something and the circumstances around it is kind of it makes you seem like a used car salesman, that you're trying to sell us something that isn't really as good as you make it out to be, which is unfortunate because this is a positive development. But you're trying to frame it in a way that makes it look as though you're trying to pass one over on us. Because of the context of how things have gone down over the last 3 to 10 years, depending on how you want to look at it, right? So I'm kind of frustrated by, again, well, I can't say that the Minister of Works is a good speaker. I'm sorry. I've average at best. But communicators, no. No. There are people with public relations degrees. I suggest politicians that you start to at least consult with them because they're on your staff. Right, the last thing I will mention is quick. This will be an ongoing story of interest. The U.S. Secretary of State, initially, I think it was yesterday, the day before, there was news that the U.S. was going to terminate or suspend Chevron's license because they called a date. That was the license that was, I believe, expanded or extended or granted on that date, or a license to expand operations, rather, oil and gas operations for Chevron in whatever capacity. And at that time, the report was that license potentially was going to be terminated. Now, apparently, the U.S. Secretary of State has basically said that, when I get it here, today, pursuant to at POTUS directive, that is President of the United States, this is on a social media post from the U.S. Secretary of State, I am providing foreign policy guidance to terminate all Biden-era oil and gas licenses that have shamefully bankrolled the illegitimate Maduro regime. Now, here's the long and short. At the press conference, Minister Young also addressed this to some extent. It's also in today's daily papers. I didn't necessarily look at the whole thing because I saw a little bit and I was already annoyed. The Minister Young basically said, you know, we have always said that we were concerned. I'm like, time out. To be fair to the government, they never said that it was impossible, that Dragon was a done deal, you know, it's guaranteed. They never gave us that. They never said that. But whenever anybody in the past brought up concerns over the results of the election and what it might mean for Dragon, they basically tried to say everything is fine, nothing to see here. Now that, again, for the, I don't know how many umpteenth time, the horse has bolted from the barn, they're trying to say, oh, well, you know, we acknowledge the fact that it was always going to be difficult, or some things to that effect. I'm paraphrasing heavily here. No! You framed it differently. You framed it differently. And you know what? At the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily mean anything that bad, right, with regards to how they framed it to the population, because I don't think, to some extent, people really, like, hung on that fact, you know, and we were hoping and praying, and if it didn't go through, we'll all have heart attacks. No, I don't think it's that serious. But it just is another example of poor communication. You didn't know how to communicate the situation. You knew that you didn't want people to panic, and you didn't want the Dragon deal to have a negative connotation, and you didn't want to look bad over it. But rather than showing proper leadership as an administration, this is not just all on Stuart Young. You just try to kind of wait and see while telling us not wait and see, but everything is fine. And now the chickens have come home to roost, and what the analysts have been saying all along that we feared was potentially going to happen, seemingly is going to happen. And if Trump could speak to Greenland, Mexico, Canada, and Ukraine in the manner that he did, who is we? Especially when you put yourself so close to the outgoing Biden administration, to the point where it's almost like if, I understand that the opposition leader was out of line, but you made a, what if that was a bad situation with regards to what she said about Biden and his outgoing administration, you did not help the matter because his administration is outgoing. So showing any sort of deference, loyalty, or defense of him in any capacity, given the climate of the American politics. All right, I've said enough. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll welcome my guest. Stay tuned to talk about the WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Money is something we all deal with, but how many of us truly understand it? What if you could make better decisions with your money? Decisions that secure your future, protect your family, and bring you peace of mind. I'm Darren Jacobs, and I'm here to help you make sense of your dollars. Welcome to Dollars and Cents, the show that breaks down the financial world in ways that matter to you. No jargon, no confusion, just real conversations about money, your money. So join me every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on WESN for Dollars and Cents. We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God, so we cannot a stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim,
right,
or the man is being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI, worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
I am Dr. Delphina Ovid, your friendly neighborhood dentist. At Community Hospital Dental Clinic, we offer examinations which include x-rays, basic oral cancer screening, and a treatment plan. We also offer cleanings, fillings, extractions, root canal treatment, and complete and partial dentures. Remember, you don't have to brush and floss all your teeth, just the ones you want to keep.
Give us a call at 235-5479.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
I'm back here. I'm talking about a WSND Content Capital Show. Michael Small joined, my fault, a little late today, my fault, joined by Ashraf Ali. Actually, Monday, I called Christopher, I introduced him as ASP Ashraf Ali. It was like, both names start with A, right?
We can take that.
All right. Apologize to ASP Christopher Roon, not ASP, acting ASP anymore because, you know, there were some issues with the promotion we were in process and all of that. And in the court and all of that. And
so today is Carnival Friday.
Today is Carnival Friday, and we just had a big announcement.
Yes, very big announcement.
A big announcement.
Very interesting announcement, I might add.
But I think at the end of the day, would you agree with me that, look, we don't know, and we just spoke about this, we don't know what the deal is yet, so we should not jump the gun and judge it.
I would say that anything that has potential for increasing our economy and employment and along that line, I think it's something we need to probably wait and hear what it is, and then could comment and then make our inputs. For now, it is very new. It's only yesterday we heard it.
Not even early afternoon. It was late in the afternoon, right?
So
into the early evening. Here's the thing, though. Why does it seem to me that we only have two speeds in TNT when it comes to issues? We jump the gun, or we wait and see to the point where it's almost like criminally negligent. We're not waiting to make the right decision at the right time. We're waiting and we're dragging it out for whatever reason until it's like 3 years later or some nonsense, right? 3 years later, oh, let's get some experts to look into that Paria accident thingy. Maybe something untoward happened there. Who knows, you know? Anyway, like that's the speed, because ironically, and I've made the case that with regards to the SSA, it's not so bad, but with the commissioner's arrest and with the SSA investigation, you know, I am now left wondering, did we jump the gun? Because it seems as though getting evidence to continue these cases to successful prosecution seemingly is one of the mountains that we will maybe never be able to scale in this life.
Well, it's very interesting how these matters are being unfolding right now. When I read the article about the most recent one where Pastor Brown and the SSA matter was the courts, the matter was discharged, right? Because of other circumstances where the police failed to comply with certain requirements of the legal requirements, which I find a matter of that nature.
Yes.
These things should not have happened because it's a public interest matter.
I have a question for that. Was it the PSP that did this investigation?
No, it was not.
It was not?
No.
But with that said, again, I do see parallels to, it seems like they jumped the gun, and it seems like they weren't necessarily ready, right, to prosecute either matter. And to what extent were they fishing for information, which that, to some extent, you know, I'm just like, why are you going down such a dangerous rabbit hole if you're fishing?
And I like that word you use, fishing, eh? Because, you know, fishermen, they say, every day is a good day to fish, right? Not every day you'll be catching a fish.
Right. Oh.
So, yeah, every day we could arrest somebody. You wouldn't stick in any charge. There's no charges to be stuck against individuals.
With regards to the SSA, though, could there be scenarios? Because I thought this is possible. If the government, they may not have had enough evidence, but they legitimately had concerns. So they said, well, look, better we move in now to prevent anything from happening. Or was it the case where, you know, you should still wait for as long as possible for the criminal investigation, and if they're going to do something, they're going to do it, but we need to have our ducks in a row so we can prosecute them properly.
Yeah, so yes, I would say, when you're dealing with an incident of that nature, and that was a major incident within that organization under national security umbrella, you have to take certain decisions to get things under control. And from the investigation perspective, you do not want opportunities for other things to be put in place to compromise your investigation, or compromise the manner in which you treat in with this investigation, because it's managing an incident, it's managing a critical incident, and there's a critical incident where you're talking about public interests, right? And a decision was made in how we manage it, right? The downside to it sometimes is that you may be able to manage up to a certain point, stop certain things from happening or prolonging. But when you deal with incidents of this nature, and we're talking about criminal offenses or potential criminal offenses, evidence is the key. Because you must have certain amount of evidence to go to the DPP to see how you could proceed. The mere fact that the matter with SSA and Pastor Brown was discharged, it means that we were not up to par, and they didn't comply with all the requirements needed to continue. There may be a review of it. The DPP may consider to do certain aspects, review, and they make a decision. But those are decisions that we have to make, right? And that is why I'm saying that when you made this statement of what is the end game, or what is the objective at the end when you start the process. So if you're starting a process of investigation or monitoring, evaluation, or to doing something with respect to an incident or event, what is the end product? What you want to find out at the end? What is your objective? And if you don't have a clear objective and you're just hoping that it would be identified during the course, it could take you 5, 10, 15 years to figure it out.
Now, I don't know if you would be able to answer this question, but when you say that requirements weren't met, is it that procedures weren't followed, or the process just was not able to proceed any further?
So based on the reports that came out of the media, it was reported that certain documents and certain procedures need to be completed within a particular time frame in accordance with the AJUPA legislation. They gave them certain guidelines to follow. Certain things have to be.
And they just didn't meet those guidelines, those timelines.
And those timelines was not met. Documentation and certain information was not presented. And as a result of that, the matter could not have gone anywhere.
Right.
So at this point in time, I do not know whether or not they will have a revisit of it, and if later down certain things can be dealt with. But it simply shows that if a matter of this nature, which is of public interest, and we are not taking it serious enough to ensure that we dot our I's and cross our T's and make sure that everything is in order to avoid situations like this, then do we have confidence, or does the public continue to have confidence in the ability or the legitimacy of our institutions to carry out our functions?
Now, when a central bank governor was dismissed, he successfully stood the states. That is one of the recent precedents by which we always look at these situations. Now, there's a degree of expectation in a similar fashion. Ayla, despite her critics and criticisms, and I will repeat the point, I have many criticisms for Ayla. That doesn't mean that I think that her removal should happen in a way that does not conform with due process, and the expectation is she is potentially in line with a fat payout, right? Just because of, to some extent, like your reputational damage. Yes, you could argue what reputation, but look, it is what it is, right? It should not be done this way. By similar measure, dare I ask Major Best, Pastor Brown, and others, if this case falls apart, and of course, Pastor Brown and Major Best, their pictures and names are in the papers, right? Their reputation, obviously for them, it's not like they were commissioner of police with a questionable perception by the public. Their reputation now, I guess, for lack of a way to put it, is probably tanked, right? To the general public. Dare I say we're going to see a set of lawsuits coming from them as well?
And persons have the right to go before the civil court, because at the end of the day, your name is only as good as everybody speak it out to be. Because if your name has been pulled through the rug in the mud and been tarnished, I mean, what else do you have? Your reputation, your name. So persons will challenge it.
Now, here's the thing. One of the key points with the SSA that I think to some extent is true is the weapons that they had access to, they were not potentially authorized to carry. Would that be an actual breach in law, or just more on the lines of an HR organizational matter? Because I guess to some extent, if you're not authorized to have a gun and it's a prohibited weapon.
Those are some of the gray areas that keep popping up. The weapons in question is not a prohibited weapon.
No, I'm not talking about sniper rifles. I'm talking about the automatic weapons. I think it was two rifles and 2 submachine guns that Pastor Brown had as an SRP.
So this is another gray area right now we're talking about. How they came into possession with it, where it came from. That is where the police officer was charged because he was also charged for misbehavior and all of that within a matter, because he had possession of it, and everything stemmed from that whole situation there with respect to the weapons itself, right? There was explanations given. Nobody heard about the explanation. They went down the road and they charged the individuals for the offense. It could not have been substantiated between how it mattered before the court. Police officer is free to return to Trinidad and Tobago Police Service because he has not been convicted of anything at all. Right? All of them. They are free. Right? Innocent until proven guilty. They have not been found guilty in anything at all. Now, that is the risk you run when you don't have sufficient evidence or evidence of substantive value to proceed with charges. That being said, we are in a state of emergency. The last report we had, in the last media report, they said they issued 20 detention orders.
Yes, every now and then you see more gangsters getting detention orders in the news.
And what's the end game for detention orders?
Right.
Next 2 weeks, approximately about 2 weeks, we should say in the middle of March, SUA should finish.
The middle? No, it might be the end of March.
End of March?
Yeah, because it was kind of the end of December, like December 31st was the
Well,
first day.
next
so
2 weeks,
weird.
2 weeks, 3 weeks again. Let's say about 3 weeks. Yeah, about that. When the SU finish has expired, is the detention order still valid? So if you arrest an individual and give them a detention order for 30 days, started from today, or started from a week before, and you have 30 days, does 30 days not put you beyond the SUE? What's the end game? How many persons have been arrested or been detained, and now we're talking about they have not been charged? How many persons will be going free?
Well, that's the thing. Given the collapse of high-profile investigations like with the SSA and the commissioner, well, with the commissioner, we don't know if it's collapsed yet. We're still waiting for the DPP to say yes or say for a fourth time no. Wouldn't it be understandable if the public says, well, you're going to mess those things up? And you're supposed to be at your best with these high-profile things, not at your worst, right? Heavens forbid you mean to tell us that you giving the gangsters your A game, but you giving the arrested the commissioner your C game. That would be ridiculous, right? So isn't it understandable for the population to be like, well, they don't know what they're doing?
Well, and that is what we are. That is where the population looks at. That is how it's going to look at it. What is the end results? What you was hoping to achieve? Right now, the murder rate for Trinidad and Tobago is relatively okay, in comparison to last year. Fair enough? But last year had no SUE, so you can't use it as a comparative.
There you go.
You can't use it as a comparative. The only way you will be able to compare the SUE is post-SUE.
Yeah.
The next 3 months after the SUE, then we could say, okay, the SUE.
And even then, you might really want to go 6 months to the rest of the year.
To see whether or not there was value in detaining these gang leaders for this amount of period, and that is going to cause the continuous reduction in crime, right? So it's about finding out the end results. Are we waiting or reacting again, right? And as we're talking about reacting and for Carnival, there was an article in Thursday Guardian on 27, Scaffolding Integrity in 2025 Carnival Celebrations.
Oh, Lord.
Very interesting in this article was that, and it was written also by an engineer. And the engineer was indicating that during Carnival, there's a lot of scaffolding work being done, where stages are being built and all that. And he spoke about that the type of scaffolding is not for normal construction. It's for a different type of scaffolding structure you have to put in. And it was particularly, and my quote what he said here, the particularly worrying aspect of these structures is that there are no active agency responsible for inspecting and certification of these temporary structures, which are integral in Carnival celebrations, and collapse of which can injure and kill persons. There is little or no protecting oneself from tons of fallen metals.
Yeah, I mean, they had that stage collapse of however many years ago,
and we are still
over a decade ago.
And we're in 2025, and we're still in this position where these structures have been built. And he's talking about, he is indicating that they did a site visit with some of his colleagues from the engineering. And there is no evidence. And here he said there was no evidence that the structures were designed by engineers, taking into consideration static and dynamic loads together with wind loads as top consideration.
Yeah, because the stage is not just the floor and what's under the floor, but also all of the other, the scaffolding to hold up the line array speakers, the lights.
So in 2025,
and those things go up real fast, right?
Exactly. In 2025, this is what is coming to the fore again. Every single year we have Carnival. Could this not have been fixed already?
So I've said this yesterday, I think it was. If you think about the annual situation in TNT. We have Carnival at the start of the year. We have July, August, vacation in the middle of the year where people might travel in August, right? And the kids are in summer camps in July. And then you have Christmas. And it seems as though like those are the breakpoints that kind of are used to slow down the negative traction and distract people, right? Whoever is doing the distracting, I'll leave that up to you to say. And the thing with Carnival is, because we see this with the noise pollution as well, right? And Karen came on Wednesday to explain actually with regards to one of the more previous noise pollution cases as to why the law, I mean, I believe it was the Court of Appeal, the Court of Appeal basically said, hey, these laws technically need to be fixed. Now, there is a precedent that could allow for the enforcement of noise pollution, but to say that it's the enforcement of noise pollution laws is a stretch because it's a court precedent that kind of takes one law and another law and kind of marries them together in a less than elegant way. And we're seeing that situation also just kind of be neglected.
Yes.
So I'm not surprised because it's almost as though the politicians just like, hey, let's leave the people so they could drink and they could fet and we don't upset that apple cart because along now in Carnival, that's when we take our vacation. And again, and I think I said this off air, it's very interesting that we're going to make such a very important announcement. And now, granted, you could say they made it as soon as possible for the public, but they said it the Thursday before Carnival. To what extent did it fly under a lot of people's radar because they were at whatever fet last night because the roads were so clear this morning. I know a lot of people were out last night. A lot of people had to be out last night.
And it is going to increase from tonight straight until Ash Wednesday.
Yeah.
Right? And even Ash Wednesday, we have a lot of persons going by the beaches and other areas to cool down as the case may be.
Yeah, why do we wake on Ash Wednesday?
Right? You do have a time. You have time off? You don't get time off?
I'm not sure. I need to check in.
Well,
all I know is that, ironically, the primary school, we got Ash Wednesday off. So for the rest of my life, I always kind of feel that loss of that day off. You know, because whatless trainees never think that we have enough holidays, right? Yeah, me included.
Yeah, so we're going to have like this situation. It was very worrying, interesting and worrying for me.
But yeah,
from the context of we had an incident already, right? Mm-hmm. Have we not learned from this and understand that all the relevant documentation should be put in place? I do not know whether or not the way the person who wrote the article, whether or not all documentation, but it's reason for concern whether if documentation, the proper documentation is there or not, right? Because a couple of years ago, Maracas, in Maracas Beach, they were supposed to have a fete, and they wanted to build a stage on the sea, right? Literally from the shoreline into the sea, into Maracas. That is not structurally
you can't put a temporary structure.
No,
that's not a wise idea.
And it would,
in part because it's not tested.
No permission was granted for them to continue to do that because that was a complete risk, right? But then we tried to do all that kind of thing.
I think depending if you gave it enough time, you would. There are things that, and Maracas is probably the worst place to try to do it because the water is not calm enough, right? But there probably would have been some kind of pontoon float. Yes, you can't put all the bells and whistles on it. There would be no lights. There would be no big nothing, right? You had to limit the weight. But you could have done a stage. But something tells me that's not what they were going to do.
That is not what they wanted to do. Average, the basic scaffolding structure.
In the water. With those waves.
It's not going to work.
On the sand.
Right. Partially. And this article just highlights that we do things without considering the consequences. When it happened, then we got to figure out who to blame. But figuring out who to blame,
we don't even do that very well. Yes, you want to with Paria?
Exactly. So I'm now getting that. Who to blame take a number of years because if during this period that we have, structural, these tents and these stages that have been placed under the Ministry of Tourism because it's tourism.
Yeah, culture, tourism.
Culture and
Especially Carnival.
Let's say one accidentally, by some freak of nature, falls. What happens? Because yesterday we had an earthquake about 4 point something, right?
Oh, we did?
Yes, I recently, I only saw it came up at 4 point something.
Yeah, I didn't realize it.
We didn't realize that, but it was shocking, and it emanated all the way up to San Grande. Persons felt it, from St. James to San Grande.
Oh, shucks.
For the year, I think from what I reading here, from the year we had 2 already within the 4 to 4.8, which is with the maximum range. 2 already for the 3, so this is 3rd. We're very close to Carnival. Let's say what if it was stronger than that? Right? With all of these things that are happening, what if?
No, but I remember when we had that 7 points, or whatever, it was above 7 points, and it was to the west of us, somewhere near Venezuela. And I remember seeing there was a building, a house or an apartment building with construction at the top, so maybe the 3rd floor, and it was wobbling. I was like, thank God, because the walls were brick. I don't know to what extent if they were steel reinforced or not. Thankfully, they didn't collapse, right? But that was some far away. Not too long ago, there was a 7-point earthquake somewhere else in the Caribbean region.
Yes.
And one of the things that I guess, at some point we do have to ask, what are we going to do if that actually happened? Not somewhere distant and we felt like the edges of the effect, but we felt the full effect.
And these are some of the factors or some of the considerations that we have to put in place when we are planning Carnival in the city.
But you see, because like, God is a trainee, these things don't happen, right? Until they do, until the winds blow so much that the wildfires in California get out of control. And I guess that's basically what you're saying here. But also there's just a chance that we don't need the earthquake for an accident to happen.
We don't. We don't. Right? So, yes, Carnival Friday, everybody's in hype of Carnival Friday. Everybody is looking to ensure that they get their costume, prepare, to make sure the coolers have everything, where we're going to lime, where we're going to fit. Because Carnival Monday and Tuesday, we de-stress. It's within part of our cultural DNA. We enjoy ourselves, free up ourselves. We don't care how we look for Carnival. Just free, whatever you wear. Ash Wednesday, you're back there, you make sure you iron your suit and your tie and all your fancy clothes and things, because you had to go back to work.
I think businesses were closed today. I won't be surprised if people not going out to work Ash Wednesday.
So you enjoy yourself, but after all the enjoyment and the freeness of all of that, it's back to reality. Back to reality on Ash Wednesday is that we are not in a very good place holistically in Trinidad and Tobago with the type of crime that we have, the level of violence that we have. Carnival Monday and Tuesday is just a way to think about it directly.
We shelve things.
Indirectly, yeah. Just shelve that a little bit. We go bring it back out on Ash Wednesday and beyond, and then we got to face it again. And then we're going straight into election, and the election drama is going to kick in. Right? And that's our cycle. The irony is that's our cycle.
I want to open up the phone lines. We're a little bit late, but I just want to cap that off with one question because you brought up elections. So I had a thought. Now, depending on who you talk to, these elections might be very important, or they, some people are like, it's the same old, waste of time, we're going to get whoever, it don't matter. Any concerns that, depending on how the public responds to this election, the campaigning, Carnival, the crowds, there's already that concern. To some extent, political campaigning is like half party, half rally,
you have to be
and emotionally more charged. We're not just here to have a good time now. We're here to rally the troops to rhetorically, hopefully, fingers crossed, go to war. But to what extent because when you look at some of the online rhetoric, I am just concerned that at some point, it might not be this year, it might not be 5 years from now, it might not be 10 years from now, but somebody will light the match and it in the box and something bad will happen.
So when you have elections, and any election that you have, there's always, on both sides of the political divide, persons who have strong opinions about the other side.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And how strong those opinions are on whether they're willing to exercise in a particular manner those strong opinions, we have to be cautious about. We cannot say that it's not going to happen.
Or they'll never happen.
Or it'll never happen. Yes, so far, our history has shown that we never really had anything significant. But we just cannot work with history alone. The dynamics and how people view certain things and how people judge how they live and which party to support and how they should support and it's opening out. We have different views on the younger ones and the younger ones and the other persons are having much more different views, and they may be willing to take different actions that persons of the yesteryear may not. Right? I am very hopeful, as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, that nobody decides to step over that proverbial line and cause more problems for us.
Because if we do, it's kind of hard to walk that back, right?
It is. It is going to be chaos, because it is not only going to be seen as an attack on a political party. We are going straight into the line of straight down the racial divide line, right? So the politics is going to change. That dynamic is going to change. I don't want that to happen. We see those type of things in other countries where you have violence raging into politics when we have elections. Trinidad and Tobago never had such a thing of that extent. We may have little bickerings. We
never had automatic fire mowing down people.
And that is the one I'm concerned about, and I didn't want to raise that because I don't want anybody getting
I know, I don't want to raise it either, but that was low-hanging fruit, right? There was a time before when we just didn't have that.
Yes.
When we were limited to handguns.
Somebody might have felt a bottle or a stone in your,
right. It was
your gathering. Yeah. You might get a bottle or stone in your gathering, right? When you're having a little meeting or a caucus meeting.
Right.
Somebody could pelt a bottle and stone. It's not a bottle and stone anymore.
I mean, as much as we don't want to link it, there are worse things on automatic fire. Yeah, I don't think either one of us want to bring it right now.
So where I am just hopeful, and in this time I would say we're praying that there's no one is thinking to cause that level of discomfort and aggravate the political landscape so that is already charged from both sides to cross that line. That is a line I don't think we as a country want to cross.
We're not saying it's going to happen. We're not hoping for it to happen. And I understand to some extent when you put things like out there in the media landscape, it's not encouraging. We've reached the point now where it's a concern that we should not bury our heads in the sand and try to ignore and hope that it never happens, because that's a losing battle. Eventually, we will be faced with the challenge. That doesn't mean that we can't pass that test when the time comes, but not being prepared for it is a good way to guarantee failure.
And I think this is where political parties need to have a level of maturity and responsibility to their membership.
I mean,
that would go with them.
Let's open up the phone lines. We want to hear from you, the viewer. We have a few minutes. You can call in and have your say. I know we had some heavy topics here. We have Sanford on the line. Good morning, Collie, on the air.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Good morning, Mr. Ashraf Ali.
Morning, sir.
You know, you sparked very interesting. You had a very interesting discourse with respect to that article about the stages.
Stages.
Now, let me say this. Technically, there is those things can be inspected and approved if it is that the agencies that have the authority would actually put it in place. Let me explain. There are 14 regional corporations in Trinidad and Tobago. And just like within any corporation where if it can, where a vendor has to, once they sell, they have to go to the public health department within the corporation, whether it be the city corporation or regional corporation, and get a what they call a food badge. Capital training. Likewise, the city engineer or the engineer within those corporations actually have jurisdiction for those things. However, it is not being enforced. Let's say in San Fernando, if they have been affected wherever, if the city engineer, if the city puts out an advertisement saying that every stage erected and whatever size you give beyond this height or this size has to get a permit from the corporation, that can happen, but it is not being put into effect by the corporations, because that's just another job that they don't want to handle. But technically, the corporations have the authority to inspect. But if they have never put it in place to say you have to get a permit to do this, but it's under the jurisdiction of the corporation, because the corporation has the authority to do it. Have a good day, gentlemen.
Thank you, caller. Here's the thing, because I made the analogy with noise pollution. Technically, you could argue noise pollution got worse, because to some extent it wasn't being enforced.
So yes.
So my fear is this scaffolding situation, we've gotten away with it so far for now, with one or two exceptions, but it could get worse.
And the risk is higher. The risk is higher because lives could be lost.
Stages are getting larger and more elaborate. I mean, to some extent. We have St. James on the line. Good morning. Caller, you on here? Caller, good morning.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
This question is to Ashraf, being a recent retiree from the police service. Ashraf, I'm trying to understand something here. When they hold somebody for murder and that person is charged, carried before the court finds that person not guilty. Now, not guilty could mean that person is not innocent. When they find person not guilty and case is thrown out, does the police continue now to look beyond that and try to gather further evidence to either re-arrest or find the real culprit in that murder case? I'm trying to understand that.
Right. So, if someone has been arrested for offense of murder, it means that you would have sufficient evidence to substantiate that case. You have any evidence and gather all the evidence and present it in the court. If, based on when you present the evidence, the jury finds that it is not good enough, it does not have the full weight, or I should say, beyond a reasonable doubt that the individual committed the offense, and the matter gets dismissed. You cannot go and recharge that individual or look back for evidence to recharge that individual for the same offense because he was found not guilty of the...
I don't know if it's called double jeopardy, but it's...
It is called double jeopardy.
Even locally.
It's like that. It's along like that. However, if it is that the jury is a hung jury and there is no decision making, the matter could be, they could end up saying that the matter, you get a acquittal, right? Pending, or you could have further thing, and they could be recharged. But once you say not guilty, and
the jury
comes
out
and say not guilty, you cannot go back and try evidence to charge a person for that same offense because you were found guilty, and because all that evidence that you have has already been presented and has already been put before the court and it's already been weighed.
But if there's like the smoking gun is found after the fact,
then the DPP now you'll have to go to the DPP and a decision will be made how to proceed if there is new evidence outside of what you have. Stronger evidence.
But that's usually that's an unprecedented situation.
The DPP has to make that decision after that.
And depending on double jeopardy, it might not go through.
It may not.
We have San Fernando on the line. Good morning, caller, you on here.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
I have two quick questions. One, if you have an employee, I have a company and I give you to run, buying and selling cars, and I ask you how much you pay for a car, and you tell me you can't answer that, what do you think I should do with you? And secondly, if I have a piece of land and boundary with my land to the next neighbor, I have a pond, should I pay he for I to catch fish on my side, or I'll do a directional drilling and catch the fish from underneath? Answer the question.
Wait, what was the last part? I do a what? Oh, you do a directional drill. Right, yeah. Well, listen, but the thing is, your side is your side. I think with Manatee, we are free to exploit our side of Manatee. Dragon is not on our side. So it is, I'm pretty sure international law would state, international law is treaty, not legislation, it's treaty, that drilling obliquely to get to gas not on our land would be technically illegal.
It is not as simple as having a pond bounded by the boundary line and the fish is on one side and your fish, the fish swim back and forth and they could go and catch it because you don't have control.
Fish move.
A fish moves from point A to point B, so you may have the fish coming on your side. So the fish itself, the issue with this is that the oil is on the other side of the field, right? Bounded by the imaginary line border what they have between both of them. So it is not as simple as saying, hey, we could take a line from here and just run it across. And it is not as simple
but
as that.
But I think the analogy basically would actually be consistent with the reality in the sense of, yes, technically, if it's on our side of the line, it's fair game. We can't go. We can't drill at an angle.
Let's flip the switch on that analogy. Let's say during the course of the drilling, hypothetically speaking, an incident occurs that is now considered to be an environmental problem. Who's responsible?
For that one, well, if we use the property law analogy, I don't know about international treaty, the person doing the action is potentially responsible, regardless of what side of the line it's on, unless there were some circumstances that was the responsibility or the result of the other person, so that they kind of, like if they left a bad situation that you ran into. But for the most part, we drill, worse yet, we drill not on our side of the line, but regardless, whether we have permission or not, I mean, if it's Dragon, right, the contract might say who has liability for those type of things. But generally speaking, if I go on and do nonsense on your land, I'm gonna be responsible for it.
So it is not as simple as we might think it to be. There's a lot of arrangements have to be put in place, and I think it is important that all that is put in place, because in any event, if I use the analogy of what the caller was utilizing and make it more fixed, if you have a mango tree on the boundary line, if you push a rod and pick the mango from across the fence line because the mango tree bordering both of you, like, isn't that called stealing also?
Yeah. If the mango drops in your yard, even though it's his tree, that might be different.
So
I don't even know if you could pick the mango off the tree.
So there will have both international ramifications and a lot of things have to be put in place. But I am simply saying that it is not as simple as we might believe it to be. The specialists and the experts in those areas, the Minister of Energy said that they had a lot of consultation with those persons to get certain things done. And if he is concerned about the deal right now, having gone through all of that, we should also be concerned.
We have St. James again. I don't know if it's a new caller. St. James, good morning. You're on here. Morning.
Yeah, Ashraf, I don't think you understood the last part of my question just now about the murder thing. You know?
Sorry, go ahead.
The thing about it is that the guy was murdered. They found the suspect not guilty.
Right.
Would the police continue looking for who really murdered the guy, or the case is just put one side, shut up?
Right, so the other side of
right. So if you stay on for a second there, once you charge somebody, it means that you have sufficient evidence to believe that the person committed the act of murder.
Right.
If the court find him not guilty, and you're going to look for somebody, continue the investigation, it means that on the first occasion, you did not have sufficient evidence to suspect.
Like, it's one of those things where it's very rare, because how are you going to have such good evidence to go in two different directions?
If you realize that you don't have enough evidence to support the case of charging the person for murder.
Now, I think a lot of the times, because there have been situations where people got convicted, maybe not here, but abroad, on less than good evidence, right? Or like mistakes or poor eyewitness testimony, and then DNA reversed it. My point is, like, the weight of the evidence is not always strong, because it depends on the jury's interpretation.
The challenge with murder, you have to prove with beyond a reasonable doubt, that the average person, the average man, is seeing the evidence beyond the reasonable doubt. Right? I mean, the proof is further. This is reasonable doubt is half. You want to go, let me just say for analogy purposes, 50% beyond that. So you're going more into the 100% side, so you're 50% and above, stating that beyond reasonable doubt. Yeah. No matter how you present it, is beyond. So if it is that somebody has been charged for murder, it means that you have sufficient evidence.
So what you're saying is Hollywood kind of gets it wrong a lot of the time.
No, you have to have sufficient evidence.
Yeah, because you're not necessarily going to go with a
your evidence has to be so compelling and can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
More than just circumstantial.
Just more than circumstantial. If it is that the matter goes down, the person has been found not guilty, in this circumstance, sometimes it does not mean that the person was not guilty. It just simply means that the evidence, evidence that was presented
was not enough.
Was not sufficient to sway a jury.
Wasn't to some extent arguably O.J. Simpson's trial based on not direct evidence? Because it's not like they put the knife in his hand.
A lot of circumstantial evidence.
Right? So it can happen.
It can.
It can happen. And to some extent, we don't know for sure if it's innocent or guilty.
What I'm saying is, I have not heard about, I have not heard about any case that the caller has indicated that a matter has gone before the High Court. The High Court found the person not guilty, and based on the verdict of not guilty, the police reopens the investigation to reopen the investigation, looking for somebody else because you found this person not guilty. I have not heard about that.
Now let's just take the O.J. Simpson case as an example and not consider the fact that he wrote a book titled If I Did It, right? The thing is, with something like that, because there was no direct smoking gun to tie him, and it was all circumstantial, there was a possibility that, if something came up that directly tied it to somebody else, that there was that potential scenario that could have happened, in which case the police, and if something like that happens locally, the police could, right? But it's not likely.
The most, and I'm going to be very cautious on how I use this word, because you might laugh, the most morally and ethical thing to do, if during the investigation or even if the matter has gone before the court and you realize that there's not sufficient evidence, or you believe that this person is not really guilty, instead of taking that person through the trials of a murder trial, I think the most the moral and ethical thing to do from a legal perspective and a law enforcement and a humanistic perspective, have a consultation with DPP, and sometimes the matter might just be...
Well, you see, the problem is, like, I think the police, the prosecutors probably honestly believed OJ was guilty, and they didn't want to let him off.
And that is what I'm saying. So sometimes the person, the evidence is saying that he guilty. Sorry, the evidence And everything is pointed towards that. Some of the evidence might be circumstantial, might not be as concrete as you would like it to be.
Yeah, glove
right?
fit. Apparently that's enough to quit.
You present your case before the court, and how you present the case with the High Court, and at the end of the day, you leave it up to a jury of your peers to weigh the evidence. Sometimes the jurors weigh evidence, and when they weigh evidence, they're of the opinion that it is not sufficient enough.
I think, caller, the point is, while you have a very interesting question, on a practical level, it's very unlikely to work out quite that way for multiple reasons, given what Ashraf has told me. And it could come up. And then that's one of those things, I guess, where, like many things else before us, we kind of have to wait and see how the DPP and how the court will respond. Because the DPP could say, all right, we'll go ahead, and then the judge will say, hold on. For this, and this reason, this thing stops here because I ain't trying to demand a second time this way and all of that jazz, right? Like, you know, to some extent, caller, on a practical level, we don't actually necessarily have the answer to that question because that test hasn't come to the court necessarily just yet. But it's not likely to happen. It's going to likely to be very rare.
That would not augur well for our judicial system.
Yeah, of course. If the implication is horrible.
The implication is and it will have other ramifications to that matter going forward with respect to the integrity of the investigator and the investigative process going forward for somebody else.
Yes.
So it would appear that you were doing a fishing expedition. The first person you grab, we carry him before the court. Well, we didn't get with him. The matter get dismissed. Let's look for somebody else and grab again. The second time around, you will have some serious challenges because of the fact of your integrity of the investigation and the manner in which the legitimacy of your investigation now is going to be a little more compromised.
The defense of the second accused could basically say, well, you got it wrong the first time.
Why not change it in this occasion?
Yeah.
So that is why anybody who has been placed before the court on a charge of murder, it's not because you just charge them for murder. There has been a meticulous investigation taking place. It might be very long in some circumstances.
Yeah. But an example to that point, politically speaking, the last thing that the government wants to see is Pastor Brown be released on top of Major Best be released, but they were released because the evidence was insufficient. So dare I say this is one of the few things that's proven to be working correctly. That not just that it works correctly, but that we have public indicators that it's working correctly. And we should, as much as we might not like the results, we should be appreciative of the fact what you just said there, we've seen it played out.
Yeah, innocent not proven guilty. And if you go before a high court, and I would say this to anybody, once you go before the high court, and your matter, you have your day in the court and you are found not guilty, you are found not guilty by a system. The judicial system and a system that we abide by, right? I am not saying that person may not have skeletons in their closet. But we are not there to present the skeletons in the closet. You have been charged for this offense, and the state is presenting its case that you committed this offense. And if at the end of the day, the state and the state apparatus finds you not guilty of that offense, it means that you are not guilty. Right? And the state found you not guilty. So, how we see it in the movies, that if you don't get him here, try something else here. That's in the movies.
Well, actually, no. There was even a movie about Double Jeopardy.
Yes,
where she was like, "Well, I could kill you now because I already went to prison for killing you."
Exactly.
But you do also see in TV shows the other scenario. Oh well, this one ended up being innocent, so we go after the next one because we have new evidence magically. But that is more of a Hollywood construct.
It is a Hollywood construct. In actual policing, you run the risk of a lot of previous investigations being compromised as well.
Right.
If your integrity of an investigation is questionable.
So ironically, the point of that is not to never go to a secondary target. The point of that is to not get it wrong the first time.
Don't get it wrong the first time.
Right. Folks,
you may not be 100%, but you're very close to the truth.
Well, I don't know about being close to truth, but, you know, we tend to release everybody here. You know, SOE, we release the gangsters. State of emergency, SSA investigation, we release the accused, including a commissioner. Just wait and see. Hopefully, we get reasonable solutions to those problems, but we'll have to hope for the best and expect the worst. Retired Inspector Ali, thank you for joining me once again.
Yes, I would. And it's nice to be here, and I'll see you next week because
yes, next week.
I would not be working for this carnival.
That's a man who's enjoying his free time. And folks,
listen, the mayor. After I give an 28 plus years service, having to work for carnival for all those years.
Yes.
I didn't want to see.
Oh, so the police didn't enjoy the carnival too? It wasn't a break for you?
No, it was not a break for me.
You know, when you see officers getting a little wine when they're on the road?
It is not a break.
It's not a break?
It was not a break for me. I didn't want to be around the crowds for carnival. Just enjoy.
You just want to stay home?
Just enjoy some family time home.
You just want to stay home?
Yeah, away from this.
Well, you know what? I am on a similar wavelength to you without all of the years of trauma having to work for carnival. But I have had to work for a few carnivals myself, so I know how that goes, what it feels like. Folks, thanks to all the callers as well for calling in. And of course, we will close out the week saying, make this carnival a good one. As Mr. Shaw would say, you could do so if you try. Respect everybody who you interact with because you never know what could happen. Who might trip off or what unfortunate circumstances might be there. So go out on the road Monday and Tuesday, on the fets, Saturday and Sunday.
Enjoy yourself safely.
Enjoy yourself safely and treat everybody nicely because it's nice to be nice. And throughout all the revelry, remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. And lend a helping hand if necessary because you would want to get it if it were you in trouble. And as long as we all stay safe, we will see each other Wednesday morning, maybe, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe we all want to sleep in Wednesday, but we'll see how that goes next week. Bye-bye.
WESN.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward and our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region.
Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.